they are under the direct supervision of a licensed firearms.
Yeah, and I think Nikki Kay makes that point, which is why she wants new guidelines. All we know is that the guns were fired, and you can kind of imagine how the firing might have taken place. And a child...
Not a high-powered rifle.
Okay.
I find it very hard to imagine it was fired on school grounds. The possibility was that it probably had blanks in it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any mention of blanks. But
No, but I can't imagine the Army discharging live rounds on a school ground.
Okay. Maybe that'll be clarified down the track. It certainly seems to have produced a reaction from the Ministry of Education. Malcolm, thank you. Malcolm Dodson. I don't see blanks mentioned in the story. I want to ask you about Vladimir Putin before we go. He seems to have made a very interesting documentary with filmmaker Oliver Stone, who got rare and intimate access, and they drove around Moscow together. They watched the movie Dr. Strangelove. And while on a tour of the Kremlin, Mr. Putin was asked if he ever has bad days. And he said that being a man meant he did not have to worry about this. I am not a woman, so I don't have bad days. I'm not trying to insult anyone. That's just the nature of things. There are certain natural cycles, said Vladimir Putin. Bernard, do you ever have bad days?
Yes, all the time. What a stupid thing for him to say. Anyway, that's Putin. There's a lot of awful and stupid things that he has done and said, and this is one of them.
And I'm assuming your complete agreement with that last comment.
I think he's sort of half right. It's because he's a murderous psychopath that he doesn't have bad days.
Yeah.
There is the wider issue of the changing PR on Vladimir Putin, because we have the warm and discursive Vladimir Putin now, don't we? We have no agendas we can see that would worry anyone at all.
Yeah.
So what do you think Putin's up to?
Well, I think John McCain is right on this when he calls him a cold-eyed killer. This guy's a former spy in the KGB who's given the nod to killings of journalists, apart from anything else, and many other things, and has caused all sorts of grief in the world. Ukraine, Crimea, all sorts of things. And, I'm sure he's trying to make himself look good, and there's lots of people who are helping him. But you got to look through this stuff and realise the guy's a dictator.
So he's just making himself, in your view, look good because sometimes dictators mellow to the extent where they try and do that, think Saddam Hussein, or he's doing it for a purpose.
He knows he's on a roll. He's managed to split apart the opposition to Russia. So by backing Trump, and Trump has very effectively destabilised that whole NATO coalition and the Western alliance, if you like, against the likes of not just Russia but China. And he is moving into that vacuum. He sees an opportunity and he's going after it. When American leadership has been so devalued and destabilised by what Trump has done, the refusal to sign up to the NATO defence pledge, the stuff he's done in Saudi Arabia, which is already causing grief with Qatar, he sees an opportunity. He's going for it.
Bernard Hickey, thank you for your company on the panel today. You got the last word. Or actually, Joe's going to get the last word. Thank you very much, Joe McCarroll.
Thanks, Jim. A little bit of a letdown.
I'm sorry, it wasn't much of a last word. And that's us for today. We are back with the panel tomorrow. Thanks for your company, everybody. And John Campbell has Checkpoint.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight, Bluff oyster farmers warn they are very near crisis point if infected oyster beds at Stewart Island aren't removed immediately. Figures attained by Checkpoint under the Official Information Act show tourists put in an average of 30 ACC claims a day last year. Two big bills drawn from the ballot, the biscuit tin today, euthanasia and medicinal cannabis, on the very eve of the UK election. In fact, it is election morning there. Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn. Who is it going to be? The Defence Force looks to go smoke-free. Team New Zealand is rearing to go for 3 races tomorrow, but on only one wing. And Steve Hansen picks his All Blacks. Barrett, and Barrett. Stay with us. We'll be back after the 5 o'clock news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. MPs will debate whether euthanasia should be legalised after ACT leader David Seymour's members' bill was drawn from Parliament's ballot. The contentious legislation would allow people with a terminal illness or grievous medical condition to end their own lives. The bill is likely to go before Parliament immediately before or after the election in September. Mr Seymour says he hopes the election will force politicians to face up to public opinion.
It is morally right to give people choices over suffering at the end of their life. It is democratically right for Parliament to do something that 3/4 of New Zealanders in scientific surveys repeatedly say they would like Parliament to act on.
David Seymour says he's confident the bill will pass its first reading. A medicinal cannabis user is celebrating a bill in Parliament being pulled from the ballot to legalise its use. The bill, sponsored by the Green MP Julianne Genter, would make it legal for people suffering from a terminal illness or debilitating condition to use cannabis with the support of a GP. It would also allow doctors to permit patients or someone on their behalf to grow and possess cannabis. Rebecca Ryder, who treats her complex chronic pain syndrome with the drug, says it's an historic moment.
No more of this, pretending that this plant has to be turned into pharmaceuticals that are too expensive for us before we can have them. Let's have the conversation, and New Zealanders are so ready to have this conversation.
Rebecca Ryder says she'll join with other medicinal cannabis users to help the bill through Parliament. The Bluff Oyster industry wants all Bonamia-infected beds removed immediately from Stewart Island. The Ministry for Primary Industries has been considering pulling up thousands of oysters in Big Glory Bay to stop the spread of Bonamia austriae. The operations manager of the Bluff Oyster Management Company, Graham Wright, says it's the only option. He expects the government to announce a decision tomorrow. Meanwhile, the Minister for Primary Industries, Nathan Guy, says the ministry acted quickly after the parasite was discovered and the farms are in lockdown. A professor of public health says New Zealand has the highest documented rate of a very nasty form of E. coli, which reflects the increase in dairying. Groups from tourism, health, environment and recreation organisations have launched a freshwater rescue plan they hope will save the country's rivers and lakes. Otago University's Michael Baker says the rise of dairy cows means a huge load of animal faeces is going into waterways, resulting in a big rise in a very serious pathogen called Shiga toxin. He says New Zealand now has about 400 cases a year, from virtually none 20 years ago.
It can cause serious kidney damage, and it puts children into intensive care in New Zealand at the moment. And overseas, this has caused massive outbreaks that have resulted in scores of fatalities. This first appeared in the 90s in New Zealand, and it's been rising steadily, and now with more testing, we're finding very large numbers of cases around New Zealand.
Dr. Baker says a study shows the single highest risk factor for the toxin is contact with recreational water. Overseas visitors filed more than 30 claims a day with ACC last year, costing the corporation more than $5 million. Both the cost of overseas visitors and the number of claims they filed doubled between 2013 and 2016, prompting ACC legal experts like Don Rennie to call for a law change that would enable the government to recoup money from tourists. But the ACC Minister Michael Woodhouse says he doesn't want to open up New Zealanders to claims from insurance companies overseas trying to recover costs for tourists injured here. If current trends continue, overseas visitors could cost ACC about $10 million a year by 2020. Bodies and aircraft debris have been found in the sea off the southern coast of Myanmar by a Navy ship searching for a missing military transport plane. 122 soldiers, family members and crew were on board the plane, which lost contact over the Andaman Sea after taking off on a weekly flight. The military says 3 bodies, 2 adults and a child, were located, along with a wheel, 2 life jackets and bags with clothes. It's 5:04. In sport, and the All Blacks coach Steve Hansen says despite being named in the squad, hooker Dane Coles may not actually play against the British and Irish Lions. Coles hasn't played for the Hurricanes since March because of injury and more recently concussion symptoms. However, he's been included in Hansen's 33-man squad for the 3-test series.
He deserves to be named. He's our best hooker we felt, and he deserves to be named, and then it gives us the opportunity to spend some time with him and see if we can help the process with what he's going through.
Steve Hansen, Cody Taylor and Nathan Harris are the other hookers named, while Liam Coltman is there as cover for Coles. Bowden, Scott and Geordie Barrett are the first sibling trio to be included in the same All Blacks squad. Team New Zealand say they're ready for racing at the America's Cup tomorrow. Today's competition was called off because of strong winds and similar conditions are expected tomorrow. Skipper Glenn Ashby says because of their capsize yesterday, they'll have just one wing available for the 3 races scheduled against Great Britain tomorrow.
The boys are working really hard on getting the damaged panels back together again to get our spare wing as a spare wing put back together again. So we will be racing tomorrow with only one wing, but if you have a wing issue tomorrow on a 3-race day, to be able to get back in and even change a wing, you're going to be in big trouble. So we're hoping tomorrow that we'll be okay with just our one wing.
Glenn Ashby, Team New Zealand leads the series 3-1. That's the news.
James Comey on the ins and outs with Donald Trump.
Either he completely misunderstood the nature of the relationship between the President of the United States and the Director of the FBI, or, even worse, he understood the nature of the relationship and was prepared to steamroller it.
Securing what's up in the ceilings.
Non-structural seismic constraints are a life safety risk. They can actually fall down and kill people.
The Blues down the British and Irish Lions.
We just try and give our players with those abilities the ball in space as much as we can.
All directions covered. Guy Espiner and Susie Ferguson, Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, are you paying too much in KiwiSaver fees? We discuss with the market watchdog. And after 10, extreme sport photographer John Price, who lifts the lid on the realities of the job that he says is far from perfect. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland fine today, cloudy periods tomorrow with isolated showers. Auckland to northern Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, mostly fine. South Taranaki to Kapiti, also Taihepe, mostly fine at first. Isolated showers about the Ruahine and Taradua ranges spreading elsewhere tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloudy periods, a few showers especially about the coast, clearing from Wairarapa tomorrow morning and elsewhere during the afternoon. Wellington, cloudy periods, 1 or 2 showers until early morning. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine with areas of frost or fog overnight. Otago and Southland, mainly fine. Isolated showers about coastal Southland, spreading north tomorrow evening and becoming frequent for a time. Bulla to Fiordland, mainly fine but occasional showers about Fiordland. Cloud and showers spreading north tomorrow and becoming frequent about Fiordland tomorrow evening. And the Chatham Islands, occasional rain clearing tomorrow. It's just gone 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Coming up, will it be May or Corbyn? It's just gone 6:08 in the UK, polling day. If tourists with insurance have accidents in New Zealand, can ACC bill their insurer? A euthanasia bill and a medicinal cannabis bill drawn from the ballot, and 3 brothers, 2 20-year-olds and a try-scoring bolter in the All Blacks squad. But we begin tonight in Bluff, where those who work in the oyster industry say a crisis is imminent if infected oyster beds at Stewart Island aren't all removed immediately. 2 farms are known to be infected, but as we'll hear later, that doesn't mean there aren't more farms in Big Glory Bay with the parasite. And as it spreads, the risk of it ending up in the wild oyster population of Fovo Strait increases. And that would be a disaster for an industry worth many millions of dollars and for many hundreds of jobs. Our Otago Southland reporter Ian Telfer is in Bluff. Ian, what's the latest?
Well, John, down here at Bluff, things are starting to get pretty tense. There was a meeting last Tuesday at the Rugby Club and about 100 people came out from the oyster fishery and they all said that the Ministry of Primary Industries needed to take urgent action. They're getting pretty concerned about it. And Graham Wright from the Oyster Management Company today told me this afternoon that the Ministry only has one option now and they need to take it right now to save the Bluff oyster fishery.
There's been scientific advice. The Ministry convened a panel, technical advisory group panel, which is an international panel of science experts, headed by their own MPI science people, and the evidence, and that report was put in as response to Marlborough episode, And that response, while I haven't read it directly, I've seen the executive summary of it, and it clearly states, based on international literature and best science, the only way of minimising the spread of Bunameia austriae is to remove all of the infected farmed oysters from the water forever.
How many oysters would that be?
Don't know.
Thousands.
Best of my knowledge, and I'm not qualified to talk on it, but farmed oysters, the numbers involved in farmed oysters are minuscule compared to what's in Foveaux Strait.
Exactly. So they could pull up thousands to say millions. That's the idea.
Roughly. Yep.
Okay. So, do you think that MPI is getting the message?
MPI told me yesterday that they, as a result of that meeting, they would make a decision, but they would be 48 hours before they communicated that decision, because they had some boxes to tick.
So when do you expect to hear?
Well, that was 12 o'clock yesterday, so they got to 12 o'clock tomorrow.
John, it's also worth saying that this new strain of the parasite Bunameia is called Bunameia austriae, and it's very different from the one that's been here in the 1990s and the 2000s and doing all the damage over that time. And here's what Graham Wright says about that.
So the Austriae is a totally different strain. It is known as affectionately as the European strain of Bunameia. It's a naturally occurring parasite that specifically affects flat oysters. It's in Europe, the experience has been devastation, and how it would operate in Foveaux Strait as a concurrent affection with Ixtiosa and Austriae. I mean, we don't know because it's not there, but we don't want to know. But overseas evidence and experiences, it will be final. It'll be the end.
The end of bluff oysters.
Don't want it on my CV.
No, I bet you don't. Is that's worst case scenario, or is that where you're heading?
I think it's a very probable option. So we have to minimise the spread. So it's not too late. What we know so far is that in Big Glory Bay they have infected oysters. The biology of it is, and I'm not a scientist, but my understanding is that infected oysters are obviously lethal, but once they die, that is when the issue happens. So the infected particles spread through the water stream, and then you have that exponential spread of the oyster. So to my knowledge, there's been some testing going on as we speak, from samples that were taken from Foveaux for February that we did for our own management of our own fishery. But to the best of mine, I don't know the results of that testing, but my understanding is there's been no positive finds in Foveaux Strait yet.
And John, Graham Wright's not alone. It seems like many people here in Bluff are concerned about this. This afternoon I talked to the chair of the Bluff Community Board, his name is Ray Fife, and he points out that this industry is worth something like $20 to $25 million to this area. It's the heart of the community, and many jobs are now at stake if this doesn't go right. And this is what he had to say.
If it gets into the Foveaux Strait oyster beds, it has the potential to wipe out the entire oyster beds. Yeah. You're looking at 95 to 100% mortality rate. It's really bad.
Scary.
Very scary, yes, and hence the concern is that they would like MPI, the whole community, just not the fishermen and the businesses, but the whole community realises this is very important to the Bluff community, and they want MPI to take action now, not wait and procrastinate and maybe make a decision and say, oh, well, we'll wait and see how it goes, but stuff should have been done yesterday.
And what's that stuff?
Basically what they're saying, and what the NIWA scientist said, who gave us all the information, is that the only way to stop it is to pull all the infected oysters out of the water, and they're on oyster farms, and it's a bullet those oyster farmers should, they'd be biting that bullet and pull all the oysters out for the good of the whole industry, not only the wild oysters on Foveaux Strait, but their industries in Big Glory as well.
So it sort of feels like a race against time.
It is a race against time, definitely a race against time. Yep.
Tough. And people in Bluff, I mean, even people who are not in the industry must be worried, eh?
Oh, definitely. Oystering in Bluff's employs a lot of people. A lot of businesses base the number of people they employ on maintenance on oyster boats and all the work therefore, and it's the other businesses around Bluff, and we could be looking at a lot of job losses and the potential on Bluff is immense.
Graham Wright told me he thought it was about $25 million industry. It's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, if that's he'd probably have the figures more so than I would, and based on that, it's massive, definitely massive. It's not only jobs in Bluff, but there's jobs in Invercargill. It's the tourism it affects, and it's basically it's world famous, the name of the Bluff, the Fovo Strait oyster or the Bluff oyster, and potentially it's going to be extinct and it'll be here no more.
So John, there are more and more implications coming out, not only for Bluff but further afield as well. My colleague Jessie Chang spoke this afternoon to restaurateurs both here and in Dunedin, and they say they're very concerned about the implications if this parasite is not stopped.
My name's Jessica Marks and I own a restaurant called the Best Cafe in Dunedin. One of the key parts of our business is the oyster season. It runs from March the 1st until mid-August. So that's a big chunk of the year in which we're able to sell these oysters. And there's a culture here with oysters, and it's a massive industry that will be affected, and in Southland. And I feel sorry for the guys down there who face the consequences of potentially losing an entire industry.
My name's Ross Jackson, and myself and my wife, we own Oyster Cove Restaurant. There's a lot of people employed in the oyster industry in Bluff, right from the people who own the boats, the people who work on the boats, and then there's a lot of people employed in the factories processing oysters, selling the oysters, and byproducts like all the oyster shell, which gets crushed and turned into lime, and the freight. There's just a very large community of people that are employed by Oyster, indirectly or directly.
Aaron Cooper, owner and manager of Harbour Fish. Oysters are a big part of our business, and it's a great South Island product that we do enjoy, and our customers come looking for them, especially in the first few weeks of the season. It's a big concern for the Bluff community as a whole. The oysters bring a lot of revenue to Bluff, and also bring a lot of employment for people. So they'll be sorely missed if there is a problem of that magnitude. We aren't sure. I haven't seen any confirmation that they're disappearing or anything like that, but I think there is some concern at the moment.
Joanna Kidston from the Kerry's Bay Hotel in Dunedin. I think absolute tragedy for Bluff and a tragedy for New Zealand if this came about, and they should be absolutely looked after. I hope the government does everything in their power to make sure that they don't die out.
Jessie Chang and Ian Telfer, the reporters there. We will be back in Bluff after the news at 6. As our tourist industry booms, so too do the costs associated with it, inevitably, of course. Checkpoint can reveal overseas visitors lodged nearly 30 claims a day with ACC last year, more than double compared to just 3 years earlier. The result is more than $5 million worth of free healthcare given to overseas visitors, funded primarily by the taxpayer. And even if a tourist with travel insurance wanted to pay ACC back, they can't. Zach Fleming has more.
US tourist Dr. Kenneth Wolnack was so riddled with guilt after killing 2 men in a car crash in February, he offered to pay ACC back for his healthcare costs.
I find it difficult to put into words how sorry I am.
But the 63-year-old heart surgeon's offer was rejected because ACC said it legally couldn't take his money.
Our funding mechanisms are provided by statute, and therefore any other funding is considered beyond our legal role.
So even if a tourist wants to pay, they can't. ACC wouldn't release Dr. Wolnack's bill due to privacy reasons, but in total, ACC paid out more than 10,000 overseas visitors' claims last year, at a cost of more than $5 million. And that's more than doubled from less than $2.5 million in 2013.
There should be some way that money can be repatriated to New Zealand. I think it's ridiculous that they don't have some system where people who feel conscience bound to pay can't pay it back.
87-year-old Don Rennie is the convener of the Law Society's ACC arm. He helped set up ACC in 1974, and he believes it's wrong. He says there must be a way ACC could take Dr. Wolnack's money if it wanted.
I'm not aware of anything in the legislation which says that they can't receive compensation which is voluntarily returned.
Another ACC law expert, Warren Forster, agrees.
There's nothing stopping ACC receiving that payment.
But regardless of who's right, whether ACC can or can't accept Dr. Wolnack's money, ACC Minister Michael Woodhouse says he doesn't want it because that would be a move towards a system where tourists pay.
If insurers from overseas were required to pay out for New Zealand-based accidents, they would look for a remedy. they would look for the person who was at fault and seek to claim money back from them. So you would find big insurance companies coming in and, for example, if I was at fault in an accident with a foreign driver and their insurance company paid out, then there's no doubt that they would come to me for liability. And I think we get back to those pre-ACC days where fault is established and damages, compensatory or punitive, are awarded. And I don't think that's where we want to go.
So to avoid that, Mr Woodhouse says it's best for New Zealanders to just foot the $5 million. But Mr Forster says the bill could actually be much larger.
People arrive at hospital and they have what's called acute public health service. That's funded again through ACC, but it's not funded on an individual basis.
So those costs wouldn't be included in this $5.1 million?
Well, they may not be.
ACC paid out nearly 2 million claims in total last year, costing $3.5 billion. The money came from tax, return on investments and car registration and petrol levies, which some tourists who rent cars do pay.
And it could be that through fuel and motor vehicle levies, that $5 million is collected already from people from overseas. ACC as a system might be making $20 million a year profit on the $5 million a year that it spends on people.
ACT Party leader David Seymour wants ACC to be scrapped entirely, or at the very least updated.
In 1974, when ACC was set up, we were an insular country with not a lot of coming and going. Today we're a highly globalised country and we need to modernise and we need a system where people outside the country can make a contribution for the risks that they take.
If current trends continue, overseas visitors could cost ACC around $10 million a year by 2020. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
We'd love your feedback on this. Don't forget you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ and our email address is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We're also on Facebook. Of course, feedback already coming in on this. Thank you. 5:22, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ. The controversial question of whether people with terminal illness should be able to take their own life has dropped into election year out of the biscuit tin, with a members' bill in the name of the ACT leader, David Seymour, being drawn from that famous ballot. It's still not clear how much political support there will be for this bill, as MPs will be likely to be able to cast a conscience vote, but at least one MP said he'd be voting yes after watching both his mother and sisters die slow and painful deaths. Also today, a Green Party bill making it legal for people suffering from a terminal illness or debilitating condition to use cannabis with the support of a GP was pulled from the same ballot. Here's our political reporter, May Heron.
This is not a new issue for Parliament. 2 death by dignity members' bills were defeated in 1995 and then again by a much narrower margin in 2003. Parliament's Health Select Committee is also currently considering public attitudes to voluntary euthanasia after receiving submissions from thousands of people. David Seymour says he hopes the election will force politicians to face up to public opinion.
It is morally right to give people choices over suffering at the end of their life. It is democratically right for Parliament to do something that 3/4 of New Zealanders in scientific surveys repeatedly say they would like Parliament to act on.
The former Labour MP Marion Street put a voluntary euthanasia bill in the ballot in 2012, but that too failed to progress any further after she lost her seat in the 2014 election. She says Mr Seymour has captured the crucial elements of her bill.
And that is the right to choose your moment and method of dying under certain circumstances according to prescribed procedures that protect everybody. So I'm delighted with it.
It's still too early to gauge whether the bill has enough support, with several MPs either not stating their position or say they're still undecided.
At this point I'm not going to make a decision. Like I am a pro-choice person normally, but this has got serious consequences, so I want to have a really proper, thorough look at it before I come to any decision.
Oh, look, it'll be a conscience vote. I always go to my electorate for their opinion.
I haven't had the opportunity to study it in detail. I tend to be conservative in respect of concern about the sanctity of life.
The Prime Minister, Bill English, is opposed.
No, I'll be voting against the legislation.
Is the government going to be doing anything to stop the debate about that?
Oh, no, look, it's a members' bill, so it's a creature of Parliament, and MPs will debate it however they want to debate it.
The Labour leader Andrew Little will vote for the bill's first reading, and so will his colleague Grant Robertson.
I think it's a really important conversation for New Zealand to have. There is a select committee process underway, and I hope that the two processes can come together, but this is an important issue and I'd like to see it debated.
The bill is unlikely to get support from the Health Minister Jonathan Coleman.
Look, I haven't read the detail, but in terms of euthanasia, look, I'm in favour of high quality, excellent palliative care rather than euthanasia.
So is that a no for the bill?
Oh, look, probably, but I haven't read the detail of it.
And it's a no from the Māori Party co-leader Marama Fox.
Look, I've sat holding the hands of dying people over and over again from my own family. I can't even remember going to a funeral where it was of natural causes in the last 28 years. So I have a good understanding of this, and I've never once had any one of those people tell me they wanted to go early. Not once.
New Zealand First has previously said legalising euthanasia should be decided in a national referendum rather than by MPs. Therefore, it's likely most of them will vote no. One of the MPs, Fletcher Tabato, became emotional as he recalled his personal experience of watching loved ones suffer.
Mate, I watched my sister die and I watched my mother die over a long period of time. Okay, so look, it's very personal to me. But there needs to be a national discussion on it. Everyone in New Zealand needs to have their say, and I will vote how I vote. And I will just be one of those people in that referendum. And that's how I see it.
David Seymour says his last count of MPs had 40 strongly in favour, 27 opposed and about 50 undecided.
This bill will pass a first reading. However, there's going to be a lot of work to do, and it's going to depend on members of Parliament looking to their electorates and the people that elect them and pay their salaries to understand what people want.
The Leader of the House, Simon Bridges, says there is a slight chance the bill will come before Parliament before the September election. If it does not, the bill will remain on the order paper for the next Parliament to consider. From Parliament for Checkpoint, May Heron.
Plans for the Defence Force to become the world's first smoke-free military have hit a hurdle after its Minister Mark Mitchell said today he'd be reluctant to tell soldiers in combat zones that they can't smoke. The Defence Force is planning to ban the sale of cigarettes on camps and bases as well as making its military housing smoke-free. But the Minister says extending that to a Defence Force house would also be a step too far. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Emerging from a select committee at Parliament this morning, the Chief of Defence Force, Lieutenant General Tim Keating, denied the smoke-free policy amounted to a ban on smoking.
I describe it as doing right by our people and encourage them to be healthy, which for me operationally is very important because there's a whole lot of things that detract from becoming good soldiers, sailors and air people, but also the responsibility I have to overall health of service people.
He says they wouldn't be enforcing the policy through any punitive measures.
What we intend to do is have a goal to get our people to be healthy and well, and a part of this smoke-free by 2020, if we can encourage our people rather than ban and use punitive measures.
The Minister Mark Mitchell was asked whether the smoke-free policy should apply to soldiers in combat zones overseas.
Any of our people deployed overseas in a high-stress environment, if they feel like they want to have a cigarette or as part of their stress relief, then they should be able to do that.
He's also reluctant to extend the smoking ban to housing provided for soldiers and their families.
I think at the moment that would be a step too far.
Lieutenant General Tim Keating acknowledges there could be problems extending the policy to military housing.
I would have some difficulty with that because I don't control, there are families living in there and I personally have some difficulty in there. But in the areas of our workplace, it's not only about those people who smoke, but those people who may be subject to the secondary effects of smoking. So I think that's quite prudent.
The New Zealand First Deputy Leader Ron Mark says the Defence Force is now backing away from what it was saying last month.
I think it's a distinct backpedal because I think some people realise that, we can't protect everybody from everything. And for soldiers who arguably over time have used tobacco to calm themselves, who are addicted to smoking before they become soldiers, they're accepted into the military with that condition. I think people realise that the practicality of enforcement might be a little bit further than they had imagined.
The Defence Force says it would work with personnel and help them with quit smoking programs as it moves towards introducing the policy. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
By this time tomorrow night, unless it's a coalition-building cliffhanger, the UK will have a new Prime Minister in Jeremy Corbyn, or Theresa May will have been returned to power. The latter is more likely, despite the polls suggesting the gap between the Tories and Labour has been closing. Corbyn is widely thought to have had the better campaign, but May was so far in front he needed to. She's been cautious to the point of not appearing in TV debates. He's fought like a man who first had to overcome major opposition from within his own party. To the winner goes the spoils and Brexit negotiations, which commence in a week and a half at every level. This is a very big election. Bridget Burke reports.
The leaders of government and opposition parties making their final pitch to voters on the eve of an election that will define Britain's approach to leaving the EU. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn spent his final day of campaigning in Scotland, cheered by crowds chanting "Jez we can." Then it was on to Islington.
And as we now prepare for government, we can already say we've changed that debate. And given people hope. Hope it doesn't have to be like this. Inequality can and will be tackled. Hope that austerity can be ended, that we can stand up to the elites and to the cynics. Hope that we can give our health service, our schools, our police, our social care the money they need and deserve, and need it now.
British Prime Minister Theresa May unexpectedly called the election 7 weeks ago in a bid to boost her parliamentary majority of 17 seats ahead of Brexit negotiations and to win more time to deal with the impact of the divorce from the European Union. She spent the day in Norwich before attending a final rally in Birmingham, telling supporters that Brexit was the basis of everything.
So yes, we need to get the Brexit deal right. Bring back that control of our money, our laws and our borders. We need to build that deep and special partnership with the EU, a comprehensive free trade agreement with the European Union. But we also need to build new trade deals, create new trade deals for our goods and services around the world with new friends and old allies alike.
May didn't hold back, saying ordinary working people would pay the price of a vote for Labour.
And there is a stark reality, which is that if we lose just 6 seats, then the government loses its majority. And that means Jeremy Corbyn in number 10 and John McDonnell at the Treasury. And we all know what that combination would mean: a wrecked economy, higher taxes, higher borrowing, and who would pay the price? The ordinary working people would be paying the price.
The election campaign has seen a series of unexpected twists, including the Manchester suicide bombing at the Ariana Grande concert, which killed 23 adults and children and injured 119 others, and last weekend's London Bridge knife attacks, which left 8 dead and dozens injured. The worst terror attacks since 2005 have also coincided with the shrinking of Theresa May's commanding lead over the opposition Labour Party. Here's what voters had to say on the streets of London today.
I was overhearing conversations on the tube, and it's polarised. You know, if you hear kind of middle class blonde lady on the tube, sort of 50 years old, Conservatives slagging off Corbyn, and then all of my peer group, all of my Facebook, all of my social media, Corbyn's going to win by a landslide. You know, so it's very, very close, isn't it? Yeah, it's tough.
And how?
I think he has a faint chance, but I still predict Theresa May has probably get a majority of 50 or so. But who knows? I mean, the polls are all over the place. This latest this latest terrorist attack, who knows where that plays to Corbyn's advantage or Theresa May's.
Just weeks ago, polls had Theresa May 20 points ahead of Corbyn. But today, polls have her anywhere between 12 points to just 1 point in front.
I think Theresa May's got a bit of a shock. I think she assumed that if she played on personalities, that compared to Corbyn, she would be a shoo-in. And I think actually Corbyn has run a surprisingly competent campaign.
Do you want to tell Brexit?
I don't know, with the two leaders, it's a bit of a best of bad
bunch, really. I think Theresa May's have a difficult one because obviously I'm only going to talk about Theresa and Corbyn because I think they're the only two that are in the runners. She's had a bit of a difficult job. This is her chance, I suppose, to be elected in, but even so, it's a short notice. I don't know. As for Corbyn, he doesn't really do it for me. That's all. Thank you.
I think Theresa May's campaign's been appalling. Jeremy Corbyn doesn't really stand for what I believe in, so there's kind of no one to vote for.
Just who will lead Britain through the Brexit process should be known by midday tomorrow New Zealand time. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
Here I am with the headlines at some strange late time.
Stop your moaning.
ACT leader David Seymour is confident his bill that would allow terminally ill people to end their lives will pass its first reading in the House. The bill is likely to go before Parliament immediately before or after the election in September. Mr Seymour says he hopes this will force campaigning politicians to face up to public opinion. A medicinal cannabis user is vowing to work with other users to help get a bill seeking to legalise the drug passed into law. The bill, sponsored by the Green MP Julian Genter, would make it legal for people suffering from a terminal illness or debilitating condition to use cannabis with the support of a GP. It would also allow doctors to permit patients or someone on their behalf to grow and possess cannabis. A professor of public health says New Zealand has the highest documented rate of a very nasty form of E. coli because of the increase in dairying. Otago University's Michael Baker says the rise of dairy cows means a huge load of animal faeces is going into waterways, resulting in a big rise in a very serious pathogen called Shiga toxin. A group of tourism, health, environment and recreational organisations has launched a freshwater rescue plan they hope will save the country's rivers and lakes. ACC legal experts are calling for a law change so that the government can recoup money from overseas visitors who claim for accidents. These tourists cost ACC $5 million last year, and it's estimated that could rise to $10 million a year by 2020. But the ACC Minister Michael Woodhouse says he doesn't want to open up New Zealanders to claims from overseas insurance companies trying to recover costs for tourists injured here. The Bluff Oyster fishermen want all Bonamia-infected beds removed immediately from Stewart Island. A decision is imminent on whether to pull up thousands of oysters on the island to stop the spread of the lethal parasite. The Bluff Oyster Management Company says it's the only option. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6, not far away.
Thanks, Katrina. Let's go now to Wellington, where our business reporter Jonathan Mitchell is standing by. Hi, Jonathan. Nice to see you. Auckland Airport set additional charges for the coming years. What's happening?
It has a big infrastructure plan over the next 5 years, John. It's looking to spend just under $2 billion to build a second runway and, of course, expand and modernise their domestic and international facilities. The rationale behind this, there's been a big ramp up in the number of passengers passing through Auckland Airport, as well as more airlines as well. So domestic passenger charges will rise just under 1%, 0.8%, while international fees over time will actually fall back by just under 2%. From 2020, mid-2020, there'll be a new landing charge per passenger of $1.19, so that will apply. There's been lots of consultation on this, and there's been a bit of feedback come out today. The Board of Airline Representatives says it believes the airport's possibly charging $65 million more than needed. But if you actually look at the charges generally and compare them with other airports around the world, the domestic charge is below other Australasian counterparts, and the international fee sits about middle of the pack. But all these new charges will be under the watchful eye of the watchdog that's the Commerce Commission. It will review the pricing.
This is a fascinating business, isn't it? A very successful company. I'm just looking at its profit. They're doing all right, Auckland Airport. Staying with transport, there's been a pickup in truck movements, right?
That's right. This is the ANZ Bank's monthly look at truck movements around the country. It gives a bit of a gauge on what's happening with the economy. Rose in the month of May. The heavy index, that gives an immediate snapshot. That rose 4% after a fall the month before. But the light traffic index, that leads the economy by 6 months. So looking at the tail end of 2017, that rose 1%. So gives some suggests some further growth is to come in the economy. It could be a bit patchy though, given capacity and credit restraints that have been cropping up and been mentioned in analysts' comments. But winding the clock back, looking at the first 3 months of the year, the first quarter, March, that's data is coming out next week. We're likely to get a steer of how that quarter went. Expect a figure in between 0.5 and 1%.
Thank you, Jono. I don't think there's anything else to discuss tonight, is there? Just the markets?
Just the markets. All eyes will be on, as you mentioned just a few minutes ago, the British election. Markets could be a bit volatile. The top 50 index today, though, ends down 9 points to 7,459. A Kiwi just looking slightly on the stronger side this evening, 72 US cents and 95.3 Australian.
Jonathan Mitchell, our business reporter, live from Wellington. Thank you very much indeed. In an unprecedented move, groups from the health, tourism, recreation, science and environmental sectors have united to push a new strategy to tackle the problem of New Zealand's degrading waterways. The coalition is born out of frustration at the lack of action by successive governments. Kate Gutzel reports.
The Freshwater Rescue Plan proposes 7 steps that it says the next government needs to commit to if it's serious about saving the country's lakes and rivers. These include reducing cow numbers right now, withdrawing funding for irrigation, and redirecting the hundreds of millions earmarked for these schemes into an agricultural transition fund. A professor of freshwater ecology at Massey University, Russell Death, says scientists have been cajoled into environmental policy and the current national policy statement on water was not what any of them envisaged. He says he's exasperated with successive governments' approaches.
We've been doing some really good science in New Zealand, lots of scientists in New Zealand working on freshwater management. We've been doing it for 20, 30 years. We know what all the answers are there, and yet whatever government it is doesn't seem to want to use that really good science to put in place a policy that actually is going to effectively protect our waterways. It's just a complete mystery to me why we wouldn't use the really good science we have.
A professor of public health at Otago University in Wellington, Michael Baker, says with the increase in dairy cattle density, a huge load of animal faeces is going into waterways. He says this has resulted in a big rise in a very serious pathogen called Shiga toxin, which is a really nasty form of E. coli. Dr. Baker says there are now about 400 cases a year from virtually none 20 years ago.
It can cause serious kidney damage and it puts children into intensive care in New Zealand at the moment. And overseas this has caused massive outbreaks that have resulted in scores of fatalities. This first appeared in the 90s in New Zealand and it's been rising steadily, and now with more testing we're finding very large numbers of cases around New Zealand. And we have by far the highest documented rate in the world of this infection.
Dr. Baker says a national case control study was conducted to find out where the toxin was coming from, and it found the single highest risk factor was contact with recreational water. Under the rescue plan launched today, there'd be strict and enforceable water quality standards based on human and ecosystem health limits. For the Tourism Export Council's Chief Executive, Leslie Immink, the plan is about reducing the risk to the country's reputation and protecting one of New Zealand's top earners.
We've got a really growing international self-drive and rental cars and camper vans around New Zealand for their visitors. It's only a matter of time before they miss seeing the toxic poisoning signs on our rivers, lakes or our streams, and they go and get their water source from there to boil in their kettle, or they drink it straight away. We really do need to protect our reputation.
Fish and Games Chief Executive Bryce Johnson says water quality is so poor that for the first time in his 30 years in the role, he's had to join forces with other groups to put pressure on authorities to do something. He says a formal public inquiry into the future of pastoral agriculture is needed.
It sounds bureaucratic, but that's how you get industry and government to get engaged. And that would be them basically acknowledge there's an issue to be dealt with. And I think that's still the way to go. Some form of formal inquiry, I now think, is absolutely essential. It's the only way we'll get structured focus on what needs to happen across the whole sector.
The Environment Minister, Nick Smith, says some of the suggestions, such as reducing irrigation schemes, are simplistic. He says the government's undertaking an ambitious plan to improve fresh water. For Checkpoint, ko Kate Gutzel tēnei.
Let's turn to some sport now. News that racing was postponed at the America's Cup in Bermuda this morning was a welcome respite for Team New Zealand. Boat builders worked through the night to repair serious damage to the boat following yesterday's capsize, which saw team members flung into the water, others hanging upside down before the boat was righted. And while team members escaped with just cuts and bruises, America's Cup commentator Peter Lester says the race should have been abandoned as the safety of all teams was at risk in the heavy winds and choppy seas. Our reporter Todd Niall is in Bermuda. Earlier today he told me Cup organisers had hit back at claims racing should have been postponed yesterday.
It was quite a tense media briefing from the regatta director, Ian Murray. This is a daily event that just talks normally about the weather conditions and any rules queries, generally good-humoured. However, he'd clearly taken offence at some of the criticism of his decision to stage racing yesterday. The harshest critic was New Zealand commentator Peter Lester, who said he held Ian Murray accountable for the damage and the mishaps that occurred yesterday. I asked Ian Murray whether conditions were safe. He answered it was safe. I then asked him some detail about what discretion he had once races started. At that point, he squeezed the remote control in his hand and launched into a detailed slideshow that he had prepared, taking us through the rules, the parameters for wind, for the wind conditions at the time of the Team New Zealand crash, which he showed the wind was well below the 24 mark limit. And really, he's a calm, laconic Australian, but that the hand that was holding the microphone was shaking. He was clearly quite angered by the suggestion that he had been unsafe in his decision making, and also the suggestion that maybe he'd been influenced by Oracle, perhaps wanting to rough up the challenges a bit. So this was quite an extraordinary diversion today in which he really hit back and said the conditions for racing were well within the rules that all of the teams had agreed, and any team had the right, if they felt it was unsafe, not to participate. He even went further, and for a neutral race official, this was quite unusual. He detailed some of the activity of Team New Zealand to show how Team New Zealand clearly weren't upset by the conditions. He said they went back, as they did, to change their wing, changing their reserve wing, which was damaged, to one that he described as their sacred wing, their wing that they had been trying to preserve to deploy in the America's Cup match, suggesting that if Team New Zealand was prepared to use it, they can't be too worried. Team New Zealand said there was no special America's Cup match wing, that both the wings were virtually identical. There was one that they had as a favourite, as one had a favourite pair of shoes, but dismissed the suggestions that they had some kind of super wing up their sleeves.
And Todd, as we know, Team New Zealand repaired their boat overnight, and they say they would have been good to go, weather permitting. What have they been doing today?
Well, they're continuing to work on the boat. They had the damaged boat ready for racing, had racing gone ahead today. They said it was probably 99%, but having the extra day up their sleeve, they're able to continue working on improvements to the repairs. It also gives them more time to fix the second wing, so they damaged both of their wings, of course, during that day, but they're not going to have the second wing ready for racing tomorrow if it takes place. But they say tomorrow's format, which may have 3 races for them, means that even if they had wing trouble, they wouldn't probably have time to get back and replace it anyway. So another day's racing tomorrow, 3 races perhaps, but again, strong winds.
Todd Niall from Bermuda. The All Blacks squad to play Samoa first of all, and then the British and Irish Lions has been announced. And as it always does, it contains both fairy tales and heartbreaks. 3 Barrett brothers, the first time ever a sibling trio, have been named in the same squad. Malakai Fekitoa is out, which is tough news for the Highlander midfield, but in his place comes Nani Laumape, who scored 14 tries for the Hurricanes so far this season. The all-time season record is 15. Damien McKenzie and Stephen Luatua aren't in. Both fine players. Dane Coles is in, but the greatest hooker in world rugby will still need to get concussion clearance. And there are 2 20-year-olds, one of whom, Mariko Ioane, was there today, looking not much older than the senior pupils at Mount Roskill Grammar, where the announcement was held. After the squad was named, I spoke to the All Blacks coach. Steve Hansen, it's lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, you too, John.
That's an exciting squad, isn't it?
It is. It's one that we've spent a lot of time thinking about and discussing, and some of the discussions have been reasonably robust. But you want that, because at the end of the day, that's our responsibility, is to pick the best team to represent the country, and I think we've done that.
Where was the robustness?
Right across the board, really. You know, there was a couple of discussions we had to go through in the midfield because there's so many people putting their hand up, and loose forwards. Do we take an extra loose forward, or do we take an extra back? So the squad sizes. You know, it's nothing unusual for us to have robust discussions. We encourage it amongst ourselves because that's where we work out, you know, what's right and what's wrong.
Nani Laumapi, that's an exciting story, isn't it? This is a kid who's really come from nowhere, although everyone who watches Super Rugby's noticed him this season. And you were asked, it simply was a form selection, wasn't it? Full stop.
Yeah, well, he's just been outstanding, hasn't he? And, you know, when you say he's come from nowhere, he represented New Zealand's secondary schools in 2011 and, you know, had a really good schoolboy career. He went away and then played league and was reasonably successful there. So having decided to come back, he's taken 24 months to show his form. He's you know, if he's not the leading line breaker, as I said, he's very close. He's definitely the leading try scorer, and he's exhibiting a whole range of skills that we think will fit into Test rugby.
It's a lovely mixture, the squad of the youngsters who, and looking at Rico before with his eyes popping with wonder as he was wandering around the room, and really great senior players. And that's a good environment for the youngsters to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the senior guy's responsibility is to live the standards from the top down, and along with the management and myself, and the young guys' responsibility is to lead themselves and bring all the enthusiasm that they possibly can, and you know, they do that. Mix works well for us.
Everyone in this room seems happy, and I was looking at the Lions at Eden Park last night and thinking they looked thoroughly miserable. What kind of pressure are they under?
Well, they're under a lot of pressure, you know, because there's an expectation they've got to win, and you know, that brings its own form of pressure that probably they haven't had before. You know, touring teams are expected to win those midweek games and the Saturday ones and the Test matches. So, you know, it's something that's maybe new to them, and they'll work their way through it. Like, it's early doors for them. You know, Gats has said he wants to play everybody, and he's done that. Well, he will have done it by Saturday, and then he'll be able to start playing his top side and get some combinations going. It's, you know, it's a hard thing to do, to bring 5 franchises together, let alone bringing 4 countries that really don't like each other that much together. So, you know, what we're seeing today is not what we're going to get come first test.
How do you break the angst when you're in a team environment on tour where things aren't going as you hope? What do you do and say as a coach to get the chemistry right?
Oh, look, you just got to look at the inconvenient facts and keep everything real and keep it honest, and make sure you're having a bit of fun.
You're having fun, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm loving it. It's great.
Steve Hansen at Mount Roskill Grammar School in Auckland with the All Blacks were named today. As all of the furore was going on and we were waiting our turn to do the interviews, I was chatting to lots of Year 12 and 13 students at that school, and what exceptional young New Zealanders they were. During the 9 years of the National-led government, the dairy industry has been on a wild rollercoaster ride, and one family wants it to slow down. From the highs of record milk payouts to the utter lows of the price crash and melamine and botulism and water, of course, dairy has hardly left the headlines during that time. As part of RNZ's election year series, Is This the Brighter Future?, assessing National's record in government, our reporter Ian Telfer paid a visit to a dairying farm in Southland, a dairying family in Southland, not too far as the crow flies from where Bill English grew up.
On the Matheson farm, the milking shed is $1 million operation.
So our cows are all, they haven't got collars on, but they've got electronic tags.
This is Colac Bay farmer Ewan Matheson.
So that's, like this, the milking data this morning. That's cow's number, that's the group that she's in. That's the stall that she's milked in. Birth ID, the time she's milked.
There are other signs of high-tech investments, some unusual. The roof of the milking shed now powers the farm.
These are the control units, yeah. So the roof's all covered. There's 120 kilowatts of generation happening up there. and we have a buy-sell contract with Meridian, so a fixed buy price and a fixed sale price.
So you've put solar cells,
yep,
covered the roof?
Yes, we have.
Why'd you do that?
Why? Because based on when we had a really good payout, one of those years, based on the return, it was probably one of the sharpest investments we could make. They've done about a bit over 33%. So they've paid for the unit. The system has paid for itself in 3 years.
But back in their lounge, the Mathesons tell me getting here's not been easy. It all started when they bought the neighbour's property 9 years ago and switched fully into dairy.
So we converted on at a time when the milk price was quite high, and then had 2 years of quite low or pretty average milk prices. So the first 2 or 3 years were pretty challenging, to be fair.
2008, the very year National came to power. Dairy conversions were in full swing. And Ewan's wife Diane says it was very different from sheep farming.
I have to say that first 2 years were hard.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of adjusting. And then when, of course, the payout had a wee effect,
Were there some hard words? You got me into this mess.
It was a wee bit tricky.
No, but your heart must have sank a bit because you had chosen, as it turned out, not a good time.
Massive change. Massive.
It was also the start of a run of major food safety scares and scandals. In 2008, Chinese children died from melamine contamination. In 2013, Fonterra had to run a global recall of infant formula after a false alert for botulism. And 2 years later, a major blackmail threat involving 1080 poison. The Mathesons say they remember it all vividly.
When it involves children, I think that's when it really hits people.
Yeah.
Babies. Anybody, but whenever there's children, it's, I think it's even worse. Even worse. I think people, really grab to that.
And as dairy farmers, do you watch that stuff like from afar as well, or does it feel personal?
It's personal.
Yeah. Of course it is.
Well, at the end of the day, Ian, we're trying to what we're doing at our end of the equation is we're doing the best we possibly can to make sure that we're providing the best product we possibly can. And we would hope that everyone along the chain is doing the same. But as it turned out with the melamine, in China they weren't. So, that's a real concern.
Then the saviour. Fonterra's milk payouts boomed for 5 years in a row to reach a record of $8.40. Ewan and Diane's daughter Melissa says on the farm there were smiles all round.
I remember coming home one day and saying to Dad, "How's it going?" He said, "The payout's amazing, the grass is growing and the cows look effing great." And that was so that pretty much sums up how that was.
But all that changed in 2014. It crashed and milk payouts halved in a year. 440 in 2014-15, 390 in 2015-16. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I won't say what happened when I came home that time.
Ewan says the impact on the rural economy and its towns and people has been dramatic, with people being laid off everywhere. If Ewan Matheson had one wish, it would be to smooth out the roller coaster.
Things have probably balanced out again now, but you would hope that our milk price remains reasonably consistent rather than having the huge variation. And the same, I suppose, for lamb and so forth as well. That if you can get a more consistent price, it's far better for our rural economies than this great variation price.
The boom and the bust.
Yeah. Not just for farming, but for all right across rural communities, really. Yeah.
Ian Telfer, the reporter. Shot by Rebecca Parsons. King, lots of feedback coming in on ACC. Tourists should pay an ACC levy at the border. It should reflect length of stay and high-risk activities such as driving and swimming in our rivers. More than one person's pointed this out. Geez, what a country. Roll your ankle while defecating in our woods and we pay your medical bill. Sell our land and real estate to non-residents. And by the way, you can have our water for free and sell it to foreigners for huge profit. NZ for Kiwis. Yeah, right. David from Auckland, who pays handsomely for his water. Hi, John Campbell. Why not make the overseas tourists pay an ACC levy at the border a form of medical insurance? We have to pay for it, so should they. If they complain, explain we have a no-fault system, then they can't get insurance that they need rather than doubling up on the protection they have. Sorry, then they can get insurance. Kind regards, Sue. This from Chris. I work in health and have often asked the same question about ACC. Rehabilitation medicine specialists advise me that the cost of securing money from insurance companies can be very expensive, time-consuming and litigious, especially when there's debate around fault. The system actually works incredibly well and alternatives could be more costly. Although $5 million seems a lot in context of healthcare, it's not. 30 claims a day equates to $456 per claim per day. One night in hospital would exceed that. Thank you, Chris. Lots and lots of feedback on this and quite a few people giving some examples and some facts and figures. So we're going to chase this up. If we're not reading your feedback out, that's because we are going to look at it for a story tomorrow night. Of course, the UK elections tomorrow night too.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. The Prime Minister, Bill English, will not be voting for a bill allowing people with a terminal illness to end their own lives. The member's bill, in the name of the ACT leader, David Seymour, has been pulled from the ballot at Parliament today. Mr English says the National Party will also discuss the other bill pulled from today's ballot, which would legalise cannabis for medical reasons. But he's made up his mind on voluntary euthanasia.
No, I'll be voting against the legislation.
Is the government going to be doing anything to stop the debate about that?
Oh, no, look, it's a member's bill, so it's a creature of Parliament, and MPs will debate it however they want to debate it.
Bill English, the leader of the House, Simon Bridges, says there is a slight chance the bill will come to Parliament for its first vote before the September election. A medicinal cannabis user is vowing to work with other users to help get that bill through Parliament. The bill, sponsored by the Green MP Julianne Genter, would make it legal for people suffering from a terminal illness or debilitating condition to use cannabis with the support of a GP. It would also allow doctors to permit patients or someone on their behalf to grow and possess cannabis. Rebecca Ryder, who treats her complex chronic pain syndrome with the drug, says New Zealanders are ready to have this conversation. The Bluff Community Board says Stewart Island's oysters will have to be sacrificed for the good of the whole. A decision is expected tomorrow on pulling up all farmed oyster beds on Stewart Island infected with the parasite Bonamia austriae. The infection was found 2 weeks ago in 2 farms in Big Glory Bay. 100 people from the Bluff oyster industry on Tuesday called for the Ministry for Primary Industries to order an urgent cull to save their $20 million industry. The chair of the Bluff board, Ray Fife, says the decision is vital to the town's survival.
It's a bullet those oyster farmers should, they'd be biting that bullet and pull all the oysters out for the good of the whole industry, not only the wild oysters on Five Strait, but their industries in Big Glory as well.
Ray Fife says it's a race against time and the ministry needs to make the decision urgently. Polling booths in the United Kingdom have just opened. The 7 weeks of political campaigning has been overshadowed by 2 jihadi attacks, and the police say there'll be increased security at polling stations. It's the 3rd time in 2 years Britons have gone to the polls, with 47 million people registered to vote. The election was called by the Prime Minister, Theresa May, after the country voted to leave the European Union. Polls close at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, New Zealand time. Political parties are being told there's overwhelming evidence the country's freshwater is in crisis and action needs to be taken now. Organisations from the tourism, health, recreation, science and environment sectors today launched a 7-step freshwater rescue plan. Kate Gutzel reports.
The groups want the political parties forming the next government to commit to their plan. The steps include reducing cow numbers right now, withdrawing funding for irrigation and redirecting the money into an agricultural transition fund. Freshwater ecologist Russell Death says he's exasperated with successive governments' approaches and he wants them to start using the science to dictate water quality. Otago University's Michael Baker says the rise of dairy cows means a huge load of animal faeces is going into waterways, resulting in a big rise of a very serious pathogen called Shiga toxin. He says New Zealand now has 400 cases a year from virtually none 20 years ago. Ko Kate Gutzel tēnei.
The Prime Minister says he can't remember whether or not he told the Salvation Army that a housing crisis was looming 7 years ago. The former head of the Salvation Army's Social Services, Major Campbell Roberts, says the government doesn't want to admit there's a housing crisis in Auckland, despite Bill English privately telling him he feared one was on the way in 2010 when he was the Finance Minister. As Prime Minister, Mr English has refused to use the word crisis to refer to Auckland's housing problems. Mr English says he had a lot of discussions about housing with the Salvation Army 6 or 7 years ago, and he can't remember the exact language used.
You could see that with the way councils were behaving then, there was likely to take a while for the houses to get built. Now they're getting built, and the government's got a big building program as well, so some real progress from a lot of hard work.
Bill English. Auckland gets the biggest share of 220 new police officers announced for next year. 56 will start work in the Auckland region from July in the first stage of a funding boost to increase frontline police numbers. The Commissioner, Mike Bush, says Northland will get an extra 20 and Waikato 24, while the Police College will get 31 more officers to help with the recruitment drive. It's 6:05. To sport, in the Hurricanes backs Geordie Barrett and Ngani Laumape are the two newcomers in the All Blacks squad for the Test series against the British and Irish Lions. Kieran Reid, Dane Coles, Brodie Retallick, Liam Squire, Ryan Crotty and Jerome Kano have been included, although Coles' participation is yet to be confirmed. Assistant coach Ian Foster says both Barrett and Laumape have impressed this year. Foster says Laumape has made great progress over the last 12 months and has become an all-round midfielder.
He's bringing a bit of variation to his running lines, his support play is outstanding, and you can see that his combination with Bodie is enabling them to both play really well. So, just a player who's a little bit unique compared to our other midfielders. He's pretty rock solid when he has the ball in his hands and goes forward, so it gives us another option.
Those to miss out on the squad include Malakai Feketoa, Nehi Milner-Skudder and Damien McKenzie. Meanwhile, Ash Dixon will captain the Māori All Blacks for their game against the Lions next week. The side also includes 6 All Blacks: Elliot Dixon, Liam Messam, Hika Elliott, Damien McKenzie, Charlie Ngatai and Nehi Milner-Skudder. And the Crusaders have named 6 All Blacks in their starting lineup, including an all-international tight 5 for their game against the Lions on Saturday. And the Golden State Warriors have gone 3-0 up in the NBA basketball finals after beating the Cavaliers 118-113 in Cleveland. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights after the news at 7, Tristan Donovan's It's All a Game chronicles the history of board games. He argues the ways board games evolve reflect the values of the time. Our culture correspondent Morgan Davey will be in to talk games and recommend his top picks and favourites. We have Music 101 Pocket Edition. Tonight, Stan Walker talking about his new song and music video. And there's more. It's tonight after the news at 7 on Nights, RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel Bay of plenty in Taupo. Fine, apart from the odd shower about the west coast later tomorrow. Taranaki to Kapiti, also Taihape. Fine today, cloudy periods tomorrow with the odd shower, especially from evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington, cloudy periods with a few showers, mainly about the coast, clearing tomorrow and becoming fine. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine with areas of frost or fog overnight. Bulla and Northern Westland, fine, a few showers developing tomorrow afternoon. Southern Westland and Fiordland, generally fine, showers developing overnight, turning to rain tomorrow evening. Otago and Southland, mostly fine with areas of fog or frost overnight. However, widespread showers developing tomorrow evening.
Lots
and
of weather.
The lovely Chatham Islands, occasional showers clearing tomorrow. It's just gone 6:08 and you're listening to John Campbell and Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. The polls have opened in the UK. Just a reminder that tomorrow night we will have coverage in depth and at length of what takes place over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us. It's 6:08, as Katrina Batten just said, on Checkpoint on RNZ. A Stewart Island oyster farmer says lifting all the oysters to get rid of the parasite in Big Glory Bay will be a logistical nightmare. if it occurs. Of the 3 samples MPI took from Big Glory Bay, 2 tested positive for the devastating parasite, and Bluff oystermen say it's a race against time to prevent its harmful spread from those farms out into the wild catchery in the Strait. Oyster farmer Jim Barrett says MPI should have done more testing. I asked him if his oysters have the parasite.
No, we haven't been finding out very much at all from MPI.
Given that there are 2 farms in Big Glory Bay with the parasite, and one is the Sanford's farm and you're their neighbour, right? Should you have been told more by now?
It's difficult, that one, because before MPI goes sort of rushing into print, if you like, they need to have a much better idea of what's going on than they do have at the moment. They're obviously under-resourced, but they need to do a lot more testing. You know, we were told that there was 3 farms tested just recently, maybe within the last month, and they found 2 of them positive, but I don't know why they haven't gone back and tested all the other farms in the bay.
Jim, can you just clarify this for me? So there are more than 3 oyster farms in Big Glory Bay?
There's more than 3 farms that have oysters on, yeah.
Yeah, and 3 have been tested?
That was what we were told.
So, so some of the farms in Big Glory Bay haven't even been tested yet?
Possibly they'd been tested last year. I can't remember when the last lot of testing was done, but I think it came back from one of the meetings in Bluff or in Invercargill the other day that they had only tested 3 sites about a month ago, and 2 of those sites tested positive.
Okay, so 2 of the sites that were tested positive, but there may be other positives that we don't yet know about, is what you're saying, right?
That's right.
If the oysters in Big Glory Bay are destroyed, how would that happen?
It would be an enormous logistical nightmare, partly because you'd have to harvest everything, probably take all the fouling with it, make sure that everything was in sealed containers, and get it across to the mainland to dispose of it to landfill or something. Or maybe some bright spark would start making fertiliser out of it. But the problem's magnified here because some of the marine farmers are mussel farmers, but they grow oysters amongst their mussel crop. So conceivably you'd have to remove thousands of tonnes of mussels as well to get all the oysters.
What are the oysters on when they're farmed? They're on various things, aren't they? Some of them
Yeah, some are on trays, some are on baskets, some are farmed on mussel rope with mussels.
So getting them out is not just a matter of lifting the trays up. In fact, they are spread in various ways far and wide.
Yes, all over the bay.
And then, of course, the issue becomes getting them out without dislodging the parasite, which goes in search of a host elsewhere, right?
Yeah. So it's very serious for us over here, and potentially serious for the Bluff community. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely no doubt about it. It's a multi-million-dollar industry. The population of Bluff, by the way, is less than 2,000. Jim Barrett, we just want to clarify, Jim doesn't know whether or not his oysters have the parasite. He's desperate to know one way or another. We invited Nathan Guy, who was, of course, the Minister, onto the program tonight, and he declined our invitation to appear. 12:30 you're with Checkpoint on RNZ. A euthanasia bill has been drawn from Parliament's biscuit tin ballot box and is destined for a conscience vote. Now, David Seymour lodged the end-of-life choice bill in 2015. It was picked from the lottery today. The bill provides the best chance of legalising voluntary euthanasia. Mr Seymour says the intention of the bill is to allow people with grievous and irremediable medical conditions to obtain medical aid to die if they should so choose.
The bill would allow a New Zealand citizen or permanent resident who is over 18, who has either a terminal condition or an irremediable condition that is declining, to be examined by 2 doctors to confirm that they're of sound mind and they understand the decision they're making, and to have their life ended or be given the means to end their own life at a time and place of their choosing, surrounded by their loved ones, instead of the kind of suffering that a lot of people face. Instead of having to refuse food or water or medical treatment and just suffering through till the bitter end, instead of amateur suicides, which is the reality for some New Zealanders, instead of a doctor just giving you a little bit too much morphine, which goes on all the time, 4% of deaths according to the Auckland Med School. This is about people having choices of their own, and it's about compassion ultimately.
This was picked up on the back of the legislation drafted by Marion Street, former Labour MP, wasn't it?
That's right. My bill is very similar to Marion's. The biggest difference is that her bill would have allowed people to sign an advance directive. And so if you went into a state of dementia, then someone else could judge that you no longer wanted to live like that. My bill doesn't go that far. I think that the decision should only ever be made by a person who is judged to be competent and understand what they're choosing. And that person shouldn't have the decision ever made or coerced by anybody else. And my bill has lots of safeguards to ensure that's the case.
This will be a conscience vote, won't it?
It will be, and last count, there are 40 current MPs who are in favour, 27 who are opposed, and a pretty large mushy middle who either haven't publicly expressed a view or have told me that they're unsure. So, it's going to be a matter of the 75% of New Zealanders who want this change. Ring up your local MP, go and see them, write to them, email them, pester them, and tell them, look, mate or matess, we put you in Parliament and pay your salary. You're supposed to reflect the will of the majority of New Zealanders.
This would then go, if it passed the first reading, it would go to committee?
That's right. So it's likely to have first reading either just before or just after the election. And then the next issue is the public submissions, whether there'll be a full process.
And the public submissions, as you and I know, and everyone listening knows, because I suspect everyone listening has a fairly strong opinion on this, will be full of passion and they will be polarised. And the people who oppose this do so because, and I'm paraphrasing, praising the sanctity of life, full stop, right?
Well, some people have different motivations, and some people believe that this is to do with the sanctity of life. What I would say to those people is that assisted dying laws, like my bill proposes, they don't increase the amount of dying that happens. They simply put the person in control under strict circumstances to alleviate suffering. And remember, it's not illegal in New Zealand to commit suicide. It's not illegal to refuse medical treatment or food and water. It's not illegal for a doctor to give you a bit more morphine than he might have otherwise to hasten the end of your life. So I don't think it is about the sanctity of life. All of those things already happen. This is about the person whose life it is being able to make a conscious choice.
So a conscience vote on whether the bill goes to a select committee for further consideration. That's the first reading. Meanwhile, the House will debate whether to legalise medicinal cannabis after Green MP Julianne Genter's bill was also pulled from the ballot today. The bill would make it legal for people suffering from a terminal illness or a debilitating condition to use cannabis with the support of a GP, and advocates of cannabis told Laura Tupou this has been a long time coming.
Rebecca Ryder has treated her complex chronic pain syndrome with medicinal cannabis for about 6 years. She screamed and danced when she got the news today. She says the fight has been a huge struggle under the national government.
They keep putting out these tiny little announcements which turn out to be only for pharmaceutical products. Julianne Genter's members' bill would legalise the fact that patients can grow for ourselves or can have someone grow for us, that we can possess the plant, that we can possess the products, all within a regulated legal framework. No more of this, pretending that this plant has to be turned into pharmaceuticals that are too expensive for us before we can have them. Let's have the conversation, and New Zealanders are so ready to have this conversation.
Huhana Hickey, who has multiple sclerosis, says it's been a long fight during which people have lost their lives. She says Helen Kelly, a medicinal cannabis advocate right up until her death last year, would be happy knowing that some progress has been made.
This is the step we've been needing for a long time, not just talk, but some actual action on pulling it out. So I'm absolutely wrapped.
Dr Hickey believes there's widespread support across political parties. But the coordinator for the charity Medical Cannabis Awareness New Zealand, Shane Lebrun, isn't so optimistic.
There's a lot of conservative doctors who have a hard time prescribing pharmaceutical cannabis, let alone giving people a certificate to go and grow their own. So I'm pessimistic because Labor says they're all for medical cannabis and yet avoid debating the topic. National think that the system now is good enough where there's less than 50 people accessing it legally, and I don't think they have the numbers.
Mr Lebrun says at least there'll be a healthy debate about the issue, but he's not confident that it will ultimately pass into law. The bill will be debated on the next Members' Day. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi ko Laura Tūpaua hou.
A young Auckland woman who struggled with her mental health while in high school says there needs to be better mental health education in schools so students have the best chance to stay well. 21-year-old Lucy McSweeney took a petition on the matter to the steps of Parliament today, and our health correspondent Karen Brown was there.
Lucy McSweeney is an engineering student and appears strong and positive, but she says that wasn't always the case.
I experienced a lot of normal things, but yeah, I think towards the end of my high school experience I got quite a lot of anxiety and depression, and I just think that I was so not prepared for that.
She says she struggled, seeking help too late because she and her friends didn't spot signs of depression.
I didn't realise what I was experiencing for way too long, and I didn't seek help, whereas I think if I'd sort of known what to look out for, then I might have sought help earlier and in general, suffered less.
Miss McSweeney says secondary school students face major pressures.
Lots of pressure to do really well in exams. It was honestly dealing with friends and boyfriends, but it's really easy to minimise that stuff. But as a teenager, it's real and that's tough.
She got through it with the support of family and friends, but wants health education in schools bolstered and more widely discussed.
I reckon we need the requirements for mental health education to be extended up until year 13, better guidelines for what is actually being taught, and also more funding so that teachers can be properly trained to deliver these lessons.
Miss McSweeney says considering New Zealand has the highest youth suicide rates in the developed world, it should be a no-brainer. Her local Epsom MP, David Seymour, who received the 9,482 signature petition, agrees. He says Parliament's Education Select Committee should do more than simply receive the document.
I hope that the Education Select Committee will actually take it seriously and hold an inquiry, as they did for the Marion Street petition on assisted dying, rather than doing what happens with many Select Committee petitions, that they get brushed under the carpet.
He says young people face major challenges which can affect mental health, and it's crucial schools are equipped to help.
Kids have increasingly complex lives. They have more choices, but they also have more anxieties. And I pick this up from teachers right across the electorate I represent. And I think it's important that we keep evolving the conversation about how we resource schools to deal with that.
The ACT Party leader, a firm backer of partnership or charter schools, adds the education sector needs greater flexibility.
Not to politicise it, but I'd like to point out that partnership schools have used their flexible funding to hire kaumatua and to hire kind of coaches, and some of them, rugby league personalities like Filippo Levi, who's working at Middle School West Auckland, has been able to really mentor kids.
The Secondary Principals Association President Michael Williams says schools do exceptionally well on mental health education already.
Clearly we've got a case here that's prominent at the moment of a young person who hasn't had a good experience. So maybe we do need to have a look and get some data on, can it be done better? Or is it a case of better resourcing is required to deal with problems when they are found to exist?
He adds every week there's another call for schools to fix a social problem, and they'll need more money if they are to do more. For Checkpoint, Karen Brown.
Coming up to 23 minutes past 6, some Wellington residents are worried a proposed water reservoir could fail in a big earthquake, causing a potentially major landslide. The reservoir would be built at Prince of Wales Park, which is in the protected town belt, and would contain up to 35 million litres of water. The city's councillors today voted to send the proposal out for consultation. Our local government reporter Michael Kropp reports.
Prince of Wales Park is nestled in the native bush of the lower town belt. It has walking tracks and playing fields and, potentially, a huge reservoir. But David Tildesley, who lives next door, is worried it won't be built well enough.
That water, 35,000 tonnes, seeping into the. It could be abrupt. It could take a week. The resulting mudslide could be 100,000, 200,000 tonnes. That will kill people. It will take properties away, sweep them away, and will kill people.
As well as that, the reservoir needs to go underground thanks to the rules protecting the town belt. That means some of the spoil could be spread across 2 nearby playing fields, raising them by 1.5 metres. Mr Tildesley's not happy about that either.
It impacts water table pressure and seepage under houses, but most importantly impacts the existing privacy of houses. So we have sports fields with people peering straight into houses as opposed to, at the moment, peering up and not being able to see into the house.
Mary Hutchinson is a member of the Papawai Restoration Group. The group plants natives in the riparian strip alongside the Papawai, one of the city's few open streams which runs through the park. She's worried runoff on wet days could smother it.
There are kaura, which are freshwater crayfish. Now these are at risk in New Zealand. There's also native fish called banded kokopu. So we are very concerned that the excavations and the inevitable runoff that happens with rain and natural drainage of the area will impact on the stream so as to destroy the habitat.
Iona Pannett, the councillor with responsibility for infrastructure and sustainability, says she hears the residents' concerns about the engineering and the streams and surrounding area will be protected.
We don't have enough water storage facilities at the moment, but the town belt is sacred in the city almost, and so we need to make sure that any impacts on it are temporary and that the land is remediated, and in fact it should be improved after the work's been done.
Building a 35 million litre reservoir in Prince of Wales Park would, with rationing in an emergency, give the city an extra 10 days of water, taking it from 20 to 30 days supply. However, the proposal isn't fully funded, leaving a shortfall of $12 million.
We're talking to central government and we can also look at within our own budgets. Essentially, the project does need to go ahead in some shape or form. We need to provide for water resilience, so we will find the money.
The project's now set to go out for consultation and, if it gets the green light, construction should begin next year. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Michael Cropperho.
High winds force racing at the America's Cup in Bermuda to be called off this morning. Of course, the extra day has been welcomed by Team New Zealand, which have managed to repair its boat following yesterday's crash, but could face 3 races tomorrow if conditions improve. Team New Zealand skipper Glenn Ashby told our America's Cup reporter Todd Niall in Bermuda that although the repairs are complete, the boat will be flying with just one wing.
The guys have done an absolutely fantastic job, over last night to get the boat back into raceable condition today.
What needed to be done? At what hour of the night did you go, yep, she's ready to go?
Yeah, look, obviously a lot of the structural components on the boat were sound. A lot of the non-structural componentry, the fairings, a lot of the clysar and the ribs of all the aerodynamic fairings on the boat, they sort of almost superficial in a sense, don't have anything to do with the actual structural integrity of the yacht. But they all basically came adrift as soon as they get hit with water. They're quite vulnerable as they're very, very light. Honeycomb, Nomex, carbon fibre panels, so extremely light, very fragile. Have quite a good warranty if they're in the air, but not such a good warranty if they're underwater. So no, the boys have done a great job getting everything repaired there, and no, we'll be back to put our helmets and goggles back on and get out there tomorrow. Really looking forward to a 3-race day tomorrow.
You've got 2 damaged wings. Are they both ready to go?
No, we've basically got one wing that'll be ready to go for tomorrow, and the boys are working really hard on getting the damaged panels back together again to get our spare wing as a spare wing back together again. So we will be racing tomorrow with only one wing, but if you have a wing issue tomorrow on a 3-race day, to be able to get back in and even change a wing, you're going to be in big trouble. So we're hoping tomorrow that we'll be okay with just our one wing.
Glenn Ashby described yesterday's capsize as catastrophic, and he was relieved that aside from a few cuts and bruises, the team escaped serious injury.
Very, very pleasing that nobody got seriously hurt, and these boats are at the absolute top end of yachting performance, and in those top end sailing conditions, as I said, very, very difficult to sail.
Any close escapes for the guys, especially the two who left the boat?
Yeah, those guys basically sort of got ejected pretty nicely and into the water, so no major issues there. We've trained, we've had a lot of procedures around this type of thing, done a lot of work on it back in New Zealand about capsize recovery, and the whole team was pretty dialed in the situation that we're in. So got a great group of guys around me that obviously know the game pretty well, we're all really just looking forward to getting into the racing tomorrow now.
Are you feeling somehow good about having come through it?
Yeah, I mean, look, the team's definitely had some adversity over the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks, with different bits and pieces on the boat, but that is one of the strengths of Emirates Team New Zealand, is the ability to react to this sort of thing, and I've got absolutely no doubt that we'll come out as a stronger team because of the recent events.
Glenn Ashby talking to Todd Nile just before we go, looking at what's happening tomorrow. Team New Zealand racing BAR, Land Rover BAR, 3 times, unbelievably. They're currently up 3-1 in their semi-final against Land Rover BAR, and SoftBank Team Japan, which is of course under Dean Barker, racing Artemis from Sweden 3 times tomorrow as well, and they too are up 3-1 in their semi-final. So Kiwis doing very well in the semis. The winner gets on to take on Oracle. Another reminder, of course, that tomorrow, in fact right now, it is election day. They are voting in the UK. The polls are open, and Checkpoint will cover that at length tomorrow night. We do hope you join us after the news at 5 tomorrow. Until then, on behalf of our excellent and hard-working team, thank you so much for being with us, and a very good evening indeed.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister will vote against a bill allowing terminally ill people to end their lives. MPs will vote on a bill that would legalise medicinal cannabis, but supporters are not confident it will ultimately pass into law. The Bluff Oyster fishermen want all Benamia-infected beds removed immediately from Stewart Island. Hundreds of people have pledged to invest more than $1.7 million to ensure Jaffa's pineapple lunts and buzz bars keep being manufactured in Dunedin. A freshwater rescue plan is launched to combat what organisers say is overwhelming evidence the country's fresh water is in crisis. Plans to reopen the century-old Hawke's Bay Opera House have received a $4 million boost, and the number of people convicted for drink driving has dropped dramatically. Our next news and weather is at 7.
From national standards to NCEA targets, schools have gone through dramatic change.